Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, grant me justice against my adversary. For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she won't eventually come and attack me. And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones, who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm really glad to be with you here this morning. In the story we just read, the widow and the judge, I'm going to move this down a little, represent opposite ends of the social, political, and legal spectrums. The judge is depicted as having ultimate power, proclaiming that he is not accountable to any man or even to God. We can go to the next slide. In this time, the shame-pride construct was an important indicator of social accountability. To say that the judge did not have shame would be to say that he did not have compassion or conscience. We then hear about the widow who keeps coming to the judge begging for justice against those who have wronged her. We read about widows throughout the Bible as a group vulnerable to exploitation, without power, and deserving of special protection. They are symbols of vulnerability, often used in parables to highlight the power imbalances, to show us where we've gone astray. Her persistence is unusual for a woman in this time. In this time, men and men alone held the public role. This woman knows that righteousness is on her side, but the judge doesn't give in. Perhaps he's waiting for a bride. Perhaps he's pleasing a wealthier and powerful person than the widow, or perhaps he's just stubborn. This woman is not looking for pity or charity. She's not looking for a handout. She is self-assured, empowered, and determined to receive justice. So she persists, and eventually we hear that the judge will grant her request. Now let's remember, it was not common and likely dangerous for a woman in this time to stand in court and to proclaim her rights. We don't know how the woman has been wronged, but we do know that it was important enough for her to be there. She had a just cause. Jesus gives us the first part of the lesson at the beginning of this parable, to pray and to never give up. But I think we also hear that the prayer must be a just cause. Can you go back a slide? The persistent widow has an interesting prayer, doesn't she? She isn't praying quietly in a synagogue or kneeling with her eyes closed and her hands folded. She is praying with her actions. Every time she walks into that judge's chamber is a prayer for justice. There is a reason that a widow is so central to this story. She represents the most vulnerable in society, those pushed to the margins by the powerful, those who are not held accountable by the masses. Through this story, Jesus is telling us that we must hold our candle of truth high and keep our calls for justice strong, and that he will be with us every time we call in this way. Every time we work to realize the kingdom of God. The persistent widow in this story longed to experience God's justice. As a Christian community, I believe we are called to be a people of justice, a community of compassion, to be peacemakers in a broken world. The people of Palestine also long for God's justice. Those who have been silenced and oppressed long for God's justice. Those who for the past 70 years have had their rights denied long for God's justice. Those who are dehumanized and marginalized long for God's justice. I believe the persistent widow is our invitation into the creation of the world that God wants for us. A world where we will relentlessly pursue peace and be creators of justice. Sent by the Presbyterian Church in Canada and through a program of the World Council of Churches, I was living in the West Bank, Palestine for 3 months in 2018.
Sorry.
That's okay. Participating in a program called the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel, or EAPPI, our job was to witness life under occupation, to engage with and support Palestinians and Israelis who are pursuing a just peace, and advocating to the international community to adhere to international law and work for justice in the region. I will be speaking just of my experience in the West Bank, but during our question time we can talk more about the different regions, about Gaza, about East Jerusalem, and the different struggles that are faced there. One of the pillars of EAPPI is impartiality. This program is not pro-Palestinian, it is not pro-Israeli, but it is not neutral towards abuses to human rights. Now, before we dive too deeply into this experience, I want to unpack some terminology that I'll be using. I will be speaking of settlements, and these are Jewish Israeli cities, towns, and villages that have been established inside the occupied Palestinian territories. Settlements are illegal under international law and are the most important factor shaping life in the West Bank. Settlement outposts are settlements that have, in theory, been constructed without the authorization of the Israeli government, but still benefit from services that Palestinians are denied and backing from the Israeli military. Those living in settlements are Jewish Israeli citizens called settlers. They tend to live in gated communities with armed guards where Palestinians are not allowed to enter. In April, I arrived home, and nearly every person and community that I met asked me to share their story, to tell the truth back home or to speak of the injustice, to tell of the home demolitions, settler violence, the children in prisons, to speak out against the forced displacement, the military harassment, the lack of access to land, water, education, livelihood, and worship, and to speak out against the occupation, the dehumanization, and the persistent violence. Everyone deserves, everyone deserves a decent life. The quality of a person's life should not be determined by race, religion, gender, or any other factor. And that's what motivates me to care about Palestinian rights. I see my own values reflected in the Palestinian struggle for freedom. It's simple. Like all people, Palestinians want to be free. Like you and me, they want to feel safe in their homes, to be treated equally on their land, and to give their children and families a bright future. I spent a lot of time witnessing, listening, and learning. And the story I'm about to tell you weaves together a collection of these experiences. Imagine with me. It's 4 a.m. You are at a checkpoint just outside of Bethlehem. Like thousands of other Palestinians, you work construction within Israel because the decades-long occupation has severely impacted your economic opportunities. It will take you several hours to reach your place of work, even though it's only a few kilometers away. Israel is closed to Palestinians in the West Bank without travel or work permits. You feel like you're caged, herded through these long, hard passageways. And you're afraid. You never know whether or not your permit will be valid. You never know whether you'll be refused entry. You feel dehumanized, humiliated, and scared. You know that other Palestinians have been crushed to death in these facilities. And your permit is only for work. If you have a medical emergency that you need to go into Israel, you must apply for a different permit. If you want to attend a funeral of a family member, you must apply for a different permit. These movement restrictions are not just about moving from the Palestinian territories into Israel, but they are scattered throughout the West Bank as well. The system is precarious, unjust, and in violation of basic human rights. But because you are Palestinian, you don't have an alternative. When you come back from work and arrive home, you still don't feel safe. The closer your home is to an illegal settlement, the greater risk you are at of violence and harassment. Your cousin has been shot by settlers while shepherding. Your children are harassed as they walk to and from school. Your family's livestock has been killed. So what do? You cannot call the police. The ruling authority in the West Bank is the Israeli military. And they are often perpetuating the crimes of the settlers. You have videos documenting the terror your family lives in, but still you receive no justice. So why don't you move? If life near a settlement is this unjust, why not go somewhere safer? Well, you can't. In most of the West Bank, the Israeli civil administration is responsible for issuing building permits. And only 1.5% of these have ever been approved. 1.5%. But you take the risk. You move your family to a different plot of land and you build. But the threat of demolition haunts you. It could happen tomorrow or years from now. But in this moment, right now, you feel okay. Your family goes to sleep, but is awoken at 2:30 in the morning. Now this is a testimony from a 13-year-old Palestinian boy. I woke up with my bedroom light turned on. I looked up and there were 3 soldiers beside my bed. One of them told me to get up and get changed because I was under arrest. Israel is the only country in the world that automatically prosecutes children in military courts. Since 2000, at least 8,000 Palestinian children have been arrested and prosecuted in these systems, notorious for systematic ill treatment. Nearly all children who are arrested have no access to a parent or lawyer, and 3/4 are physically assaulted during arrest, transfer, or interrogation. Imagine how you would feel. Your child is taken from your home in the middle of the night. You don't know where they're being taken or when they will be released. But you know they are likely being physically assaulted, and there's nothing that you can do. And the charge for most children is throwing stones. 99% of charges against Palestinians result in conviction, whereas 8% of cases against Israeli settlers result in conviction. Settlers live under Israeli civilian law, similar to how we would live here, while Palestinians in the West Bank live under military law. A law that is supposed to be temporary, a law that you are not supposed to continue to live under, and it routinely deprives them of their rights. A military occupation is not supposed to last this long. You should not have generations born into this type of life. As we spoke about in the children's time, peace is not just an absence of war or violence. Peace is the creation of inclusive, equitable, and just communities for all people living in them. These communities long for God's justice and peace. Twice a week, our team would drive to a community called Habet Samra in the north of the Jordan Valley to provide protective presence to shepherds who regularly faced harassment. When we would arrive, we would receive a warm welcome from Mahid, the man on the left, and he would throw his hands in the air and say, "Galo Garaba," which means, "Hello, my family." We would head out, Mahid with Diab and Fauzi, walking through the beautiful landscape, eating fresh cheese and fresh baked bread. The biblical landscape would come alive at this time as we walked through the rolling hills. The days would begin so peaceful, but would rarely stay that way. When gazing out at this beautiful landscape, if you look in one direction, you'll see a military base, and if you look in the other direction, you'll see a settlement outpost. This family's land that they've lived on for generations, has been labeled as a closed military zone. In the Jordan Valley, over half the land has been classified this way. This is land that the Palestinians depend on for farming and land that is home. In these zones, we heard stories and saw firsthand the military training by shooting tanks and guns within communities and right beside family homes. We'd hear about military raids that were practiced on innocent families, and we'd see active landmines and sound bombs that were left behind. But I want to tell you about one specific day, about my experience of Easter in the Holy Land. On the Saturday of Easter weekend, the Israeli military approached us while we were shepherding and told us that we had to leave. Now, this was not uncommon. We knew where the boundaries were, we knew where we were allowed to be. So I spoke with the military, and they agreed to meet us the next day, Easter Sunday, so the shepherds could show their land right papers. Now, these were papers that they had received during the 1960s to show that this land had been in their family for centuries. Now, we were shocked. we could feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps tomorrow, their rights to their land would be recognized. Perhaps tomorrow, the pressure and the fear might lift just a little. But the next day, the military never came. This family has now permanently left Harbat Samra. They have sold their sheep and they have moved away because the violence, the harassment, the injustice was just too much to bear. They have been forcibly displaced from the land of their ancestors, and their children carry a trauma of generations. I learned an important aspect of Easter that day. Easter is about challenging oppressive systems of power that marginalize and dehumanize. If we think back to the first century in which the Gospels were written, we know that the people of the land were occupied by the Roman Empire. Looking forward 2,000 years, things don't look so different. The forms of oppression may have changed. There were no machine guns, tanks, or tear gas in biblical times, but there were people who were seen as less. Jesus was crucified because he refused the dominant system of power that produced injustice. So I also see the face of God in the persistent widow, as one who will not abandon us and our calls for justice. During my time there, I asked many people if they envisioned a future where Palestinians and Israelis could live together. And I want to tell you my favorite answer because it's about a camel named Pistachio. As a disclaimer, this is Pistachio's brother. One time, a soldier was carrying a machine gun and wanted to ride the camel. So his owner said, "Sure, go ahead." But Pistachio went ballistic and would not let the soldier touch him, let alone ride him. And the soldier said, "Why did you tell me I could ride this camel? He's dangerous." And the soldier said, "Put your gun down and try again." So the soldier put his gun in the back of the truck and approached the camel again. This time, Pistachio stayed calm and graciously let the soldier ride him. Pistachio's owner used this example to illustrate that peace cannot be achieved through a military solution. Justice cannot be realized while the occupation continues. Healing cannot begin until abuse ends. I was told, we don't resist the occupation because we are trying to destroy our neighbor. We are just hoping to gain the right to be a neighbor. I asked many of the families and communities that I met, what do you want Canadians to know about what's happening here? I was told by Palestinians and Israelis, take the real picture of Palestine and the truth home with you. Maybe if the world could see how we live, they would help. On one of my last days in the region, myself and other ecumenical accompaniers were asked, how did you feel about what you saw and what you experienced? Most of us had been tear gassed, many of us had been harassed by settlers or the military, and some of us had been threatened with arrest. We all responded with some variation of angry. This is unjust, this is not okay. And we were told, that's good, but it's not enough for you to feel bad for us. Now that you know what's happening here, you must act on it. You must share our stories. You must call on your government to pressure Israel into following international law, and you mustn't give up. It's not enough to feel privileged we don't live in these circumstances. We must use that privilege for change. If you see your values reflected here, I encourage you to learn more. I'd be happy to share reputable news sources that report on the reality of the situation, like the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, the Palestinian news agency Man News Agency, or the international source Al Jazeera. I also challenge you to share what you're learning with your friends and your family. Challenge misconceptions and stereotypes. And use your power as citizens. You can sign petitions advocating for justice through organizations like Amnesty International. And you can use your power as consumers, not to purchase products that fund the occupation or are used to oppress groups of people, like these ones, and we can talk more about this downstairs. I believe we are called to be like the persistent widow. This woman had everything working against her. She was poor, she was a widow, she was a woman, but she was relentless. She did not want charity, she demanded justice. And she was refused that justice time and time again. I met countless Palestinians who embodied the woman from this story. They continue to be silenced through forcible displacement and physical and psychological attacks. I also embodied the woman from this story, bravely calling for an end to the occupation and working for a just peace where everyone can live together in the region, where everyone is equal, where everyone is included. The ministry of the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program is a ministry of presence. It is literally walking alongside those facing injustice and dehumanization. Accompaniment is a thread that runs through our Bible. As God accompanies us, we are called to do the same for each other. I want to thank you for your gifts to Presbyterian sharing and providing the means for accompaniment work like this and around the world. We are in an impossible moment. The global church is called into costly solidarity with the local church to boldly accompany those facing injustice. A ministry of presence cannot be passive. It must speak out in the face of oppression. Accompaniment is daring by speaking truth in power. We are called into God's mission, a mission of hope, a mission of peace, a mission of justice, and a mission of love. So I ask you, in what ways are you called into this mission? In what ways can you be an advocate for justice? Let's pray together with the words offered by the General Secretary of the Presbyterian Church after more than 60 people were killed peacefully protesting at the Gaza border. Let's pray. God of mercy and compassion, of grace and reconciliation, source of life, creator and sustainer of all, you hold all situations and souls in your hand. You sent Christ into the world that we might have life and have it abundantly. He came as the Prince of Peace to a world that is too often tragic and violent. We turn to you in these hours and days when conflict is a daily and deadly reality for our sisters and brothers in Palestine. In the face of the violence there, we come to you in grief. For those whose lives are cut short or forever changed, we come to you in sorrow and in anger at the violence we hear about and witness. We come to you in confession for our silence and complacency. We come to you praying that all people come to understand the futility of hatred and violence, and that your grace and love spill over and stretch across political, religious, and national boundaries, so people may see the horror and failure of violence and search together for justice, peace, and truth. Let hatred be turned into understanding, fear to trust, despair to hope, oppression to freedom, occupation to liberation, and division to reconciliation.